Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Your opinion on history is about to change. Ancient Romans stealing treasure, dinosaur sightings, and lost civilizations are just a few of the things we will be exploring together in today's video. Here are some of the most shocking, forbidden mysteries from Africa. Giant footprints. Did giants live in Africa 200 million years ago? That's what the evidence seems to suggest. A 200-million-year-old giant footprint has been discovered in South Africa, and experts are wondering who or what left it behind. It's too big to belong to a regular human, but it does look like a giant foot. The enormous footprint is said to have been found in 1912 by a hunter named Stoffel Coetzee. He was exploring a remote area in South Africa looking for big game when he came across the enormous footprint. The area is known as Mpaluzi, located near the border of Swaziland. The footprint from the edge of the heel to the tip of the big toe is almost 5 feet long. The footprint is as long as some people are tall. It's been both confusing and amazing for geologists over the last century. Professor Peter Wagner from Nelson Mandela University says this footprint is more likely to be evidence of little green men rather than a result of natural erosion. Professor Wagner has master's degrees in chemistry, physics, mathematics, law, a PhD in applied mathematics, and an LLD in human rights and labor law. He, along with many other scientists, believes the footprint could be between 200 million and 3 billion years old, based on current understanding of granite formation throughout Earth's history. Here's a photograph of it next to South African scientist and explorer Michael Tellinger. And here's another picture of the footprint next to American professor Robert Schoch from Boston University. As you can clearly see in these pictures, the footprint is real, and you can see just how big it is. Michael claimed that judging simply by the size of the print, whoever or whatever left it behind must have been 24 feet tall. How do you explain that one? Michael Tellinger explains it as evidence of extraterrestrial giants, whom he said lived on the planet long before humans came around. Michael isn't some random fringe theorist. He is a real researcher who's been nicknamed the Indiana Jones of South Africa for his exploits. Michael dedicated a large part of his life to discovering the forgotten secrets of the continent. Robert Schoch is another scientist who's been trying to uncover the mysteries of Africa since before the 1990s. He was the co-author of a report on the Sphinx water erosion hypothesis, which you may have heard about in another video. But just in case, the Sphinx water erosion hypothesis says that the Sphinx is way older than scientists are telling us. Water eroded the Sphinx during an ancient flood or heavy rainfall, which left water damage on the monument. This would have happened about 11,500 years ago. Robert traveled to the Sphinx in 1990 to study the world-famous monument. He originally estimated that the structure was built around 5000 BC, but ultimately pushed his estimated date of construction closer to 9700 BC. It's surprising that these researchers would be spending so much time investigating this place if they didn't think there was something more to it. They are open to many theories that would completely change history. They are convinced this is indeed the print of an African giant. Other scientists believe that this footprint is the result of natural erosion. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear in the comments. The deadly Nandi bear. A creature of legend may be lurking deep in the heart of East Africa. Known as the Nandi bear, it is a beast of terrifying strength and ferocity. It gets its name from the Nandi people of western Kenya. If real, this thing is unlike any bear you have ever seen. It has red hair, which so far so good, but then it also scalps people. Can you think of a single bear attack in recent memory in which the victim was scalped? I mean, bitten? Yes. Mauled? Sure. But scalped? That's apparently what this mythical African bear does. The creature is nocturnal. It can stand up on its hind legs, and it was sighted up until very recently. In 1905, British soldier and ornithologist Richard Meinertzagen guessed the Nandi bear was secretly a type of anthropoid ape that was going extinct. In 1913, the British colonial administrator in Kenya, Charles William Hobley, drew a picture of the creature's foot that he had supposedly found. In 1961, American writer Gardner Soule claimed sightings in Kenya were reported throughout the 19th and 20th century. However, not a single bear was ever caught. As of right now, there is no evidence that the bear exists. Many scientists have attributed the sightings over the past few centuries to misidentifications of other species. For example, someone saw some big, ambiguous herbivore in the trees and mistook it for a red-haired bear. But what if they have been seeing a giant bear? In 1923, British paleontologist Charles Andrews came up with a very exciting theory. He suggested the Nandi bear was really a surviving Chalicotherium. Now that's exciting! Chalicotherium is one of the weirdest creatures that has ever evolved on the planet. It was sort of like a horse, but it wasn't a horse. It had hooves, but it also had claws. It looked kind of like a giraffe, but with a shorter neck. The Chalicotherium's front limbs were far longer than its hind limbs, similar to gorillas and giant sloths. Scientists have done the best they can based on the skeletons they've discovered, but they just can't get an image of the beast that they're all happy with. The more important thing to know is that the Chalicotherium went extinct 9 million years ago. If it is still living in East Africa today, that would be big news. It would be like finding Bigfoot. Scientists don't think it's going to happen. In 1932, the British Natural History Museum made a statement saying that the Nandi bear is nothing but a spotted hyena, and that would explain why the attacks were so ferocious, and why perhaps stories got around of people getting scalped. Africa's ancient nuclear reactor. A nuclear reactor was discovered in Africa that is 2 billion years old. Hold your shock though, because things get even crazier. Either this thing was created by an ancient race of intelligent beings with serious technology, or it was made by nature itself. Either way, the story behind the nuclear reactor is astounding. In 1972, a team of French scientists analyzed a piece of uranium ore that was extracted from a mine in the African nation of Gabon. The scientists were surprised to find the uranium ore had a slightly lower amount of uranium-235 than normal. Here's why that is so alarming. Uranium-235 is the isotope that undergoes nuclear fission, splitting atoms to release their energy. Scientists concluded that there was only one way this sample of uranium ore could have had such low content. That one reason is it must have been part of a nuclear reactor in the distant past. This rock had somehow already gone through the process of nuclear fission. If you're wondering how something like this could be possible, you're not alone. It seems insane to think a nuclear reactor could form on its own, yet scientists say it's not only plausible, but definite. They say there are 17 natural reactors that have now been discovered in Gabon. 2 billion years ago, there was way more uranium in the Earth's crust. The planet was practically glowing from all the highly concentrated uranium-235. Because there was so much, it wasn't difficult for nature to do her thing. And boy did she! As groundwater filtered through the sandstone and rubbed up against the uranium ore, a natural nuclear reaction occurred. The natural elements were all in place to create a feedback mechanism that regulated the power of the natural reactor. It flicked on and off intermittently for many hundreds of thousands of years, creating, on average, 100 kilowatts of power. That's about enough electricity to power 1,000 light bulbs. It's not going to power an entire city, but maybe a small village. What scientists found in 1972 likely isn't evidence of an advanced civilization on the planet 2 billion years after it was born, but it is still curious and makes you wonder if ancient people knew about it. There are so many questions and so many possibilities. Maybe one day scientists will figure out how to harness this incredible power to create infinite free energy, or find out how nature was able to make this happen. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Jason Crawford and Johnny Phoenix for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. Madagascar's resident monstrosity. There is something in the jungles of Africa that some believe to be demons. Some think they are a Bigfoot-type creature, perhaps a primitive human species living in the woods. Others just call them the little men of the forests. It's called the Kalanoro, and its legends are woven deeply into Madagascar's history. To understand this creature, I need to take you deep into Madagascar's wild interior. There are hardly any humans there. It's a seemingly endless rainforest, more untouched in some places than the deepest parts of the Amazon. In such an empty and mysterious wilderness, legends take root easily. That's the case with Kalanoro. For those villagers living on the outskirts of the wild rainforest, Kalanoro is a real part of daily life. People tell tales of seeing the creature. They scare their children with horror stories about the beast. The Kalanoro is described as a small man about 3 feet tall, covered in hair and with long fingernails. On second thought, the Kalanoro doesn't sound that scary. It sounds kind of like a monkey, like a miniature Bigfoot, or better yet, it sounds like it might be a lemur. This is where science merges with legend. Madagascar is home to some of the coolest lemurs in the world. They live in relative peace in the thick virgin forests and inaccessible parts of the island. Lemurs are arboreal and nocturnal animals that could look like small monkey/human hybrids, but they aren't aggressive. Lemurs have big eyes, wet noses, can walk on 2 legs, sometimes use tools, and have fingernails instead of claws. They are a lot like small, fuzzy people, and they were only recently discovered. European scientists only learned of lemurs in the 17th century. It wasn't even until the 1950s that scientists took an interest in studying the primates. In the last 70 years, around 100 new species have been discovered. Many of them are on the island of Madagascar. Legends on the African islands speak of a giant lemur living in the forests as recently as 2,000 years ago. Some scientists think this might be more than a legend. There could have been a lemur species about the size of a human prior to humans arriving on the island. But what if that giant lemur is still around? What if there are real, human-sized lemurs living in isolation? These could be the real Kalanoro. All of these legends can be traced back to the same time. When people arrived on Madagascar roughly 2,000 years ago, they began telling stories of small, hairy humanoids. They also started telling stories of giant lemurs. Do you think the Kalanoro is real? Let me know in the comments. The fall of a Berber empire. An African king, a crazed emperor, and a treasure in the American Midwest. What do these 3 things have in common? They are all tied to a crazy story that you're not going to find in a high school history book. This is like a real-life soap opera. In the year 39 AD, Roman Emperor Caligula was on the throne. Caligula was known for his cruelty, madness, and extravagance. The emperor murdered the son of King Juba II, then invaded his kingdom of Numidia. This is a little-known story of very powerful and influential people. Juba II was a very successful ruler and a respected scholar. His wife was none other than Cleopatra's daughter, also named Cleopatra. Queen Cleopatra, the one we all know and love, was technically Queen Cleopatra VII. She and Mark Antony had a daughter who managed to survive Egypt's defeat in the 1st century BC. Her name was Cleopatra Selene II. Cleopatra Selene married Juba II, a Berber prince from Numidia. Juba II claimed to be a direct descendant of the legendary general Hannibal, the one who fought against the Roman Republic. In 46 BC, Julius Caesar, the same Caesar who had a romantic love affair with Cleopatra, defeated Juba II's father and stole Numidia. Juba II remained king of Numidia, but only when he became an ally of Rome. Juba II traveled to Rome, learned Latin and Greek, and was granted full Roman citizenship. He is believed to have been one of the brightest people in Rome, and maybe the man with the most education. In his 20s, Juba II wrote a book on Roman archaeology. He even fought alongside Octavian, aka Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus, aka the founder of the Roman Empire and first emperor, at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Juba went on to have 2 children with Cleopatra. Then he married a princess of Cappadocia named Glaphyra. Juba II met Glaphyra while traveling alongside Caesar and fell in love with her. It's unknown whether Juba II was polygamous or if his wife Cleopatra Selene II had died by this time. Glaphyra was married to Alexander, the son of legendary King Herod the Great, the same one from the Bible. Alexander was executed in 7 BC for a conspiracy against his father. Since her husband died in disgrace, soon after Glaphyra married Juba II. Then, the year after that, she fell in love with Herod Archelaus, who was another son of Herod the Great. She divorced Juba to marry her former brother-in-law. Juba died in 23 AD, and his son, Ptolemy of Mauritania, took over the throne. A few years later, Ptolemy was executed by crazed Emperor Caligula. The African Empire was annexed and directly became a Roman province. Caligula may have been hoping to steal a great treasure from Juba II's son, but the treasure was never found. It turned up 2,000 years later in a cave in Illinois, but I'll tell you about that in a bit. More mysterious footprints. The giant footprint I told you about earlier isn't the only weird footprint in South Africa, not by a long shot. Near Johannesburg is a series of shoe prints that appear to be 100,000 years old. Although scientists don't have conclusive evidence that the prints were left by people wearing shoes, the whole thing is extremely bizarre, especially because the strange prints were found at 3 separate archaeological sites. Nearly identical shoe prints at 3 different places in South Africa. That is a very strange coincidence. One of the scientists investigating the phenomenon is Charles Helm at Nelson Mandela University. Charles and his colleagues believe that this is proof that the Cape South Coast is a place where early humans survived, evolved, and thrived. They are still studying and dating these ancient sites, but they believe that the prints were likely left by ancient people with shoes on their feet. If true, Charles said we'll be forced to reconsider human evolution as a whole, but maybe not for the reasons you're thinking. Just because people were wearing shoes 100,000 years ago doesn't mean that they were flying around in spaceships. What it means is that humans had already figured out how to dress themselves in the latest fashions. It goes to show that our prehistoric relatives, and likely even our Neanderthal cousins, were way smarter than scientists have been giving them credit for. The prints were likely left by sandals, not sneakers or big boots like people wear today. 100,000 years ago, this part of South Africa was a coastal region, and the ground was soft clay. As a group of people walked, their feet left deep imprints in the muck. Then the muck hardened and the footprints fossilized. The shapes of the prints are clearly human, but there are no toe prints. What scientists did notice were small indentations along the edges of the prints, which they think might be evidence of laces. The sandals may have been tied to the wearer's feet with real shoelaces. In a report published by Charles Helm, he says they have found 14 prints so far and are looking for more. The African Pterodactyl. What if I told you that dinosaurs are still alive? They're just hiding deep in the jungle. There is a pterodactyl-like monster that's been spotted in the African regions of Zambia, Angola, and Congo. They call it Kongamato, which translates roughly to mean overturner of boats. The curious monster earned its nickname because, according to locals who have seen it, it flies so low to the water that it can flip over their boats. Kongamato causes their boats to flip, not just as a prank. It does it so that as the fishermen splash around, it can easily swoop in and eat them. The flying beast is huge. It's clearly big enough to eat a man, but is it really a dinosaur? Those who have seen the prehistoric flying reptile have described it as being either red or black. Its wingspan ranges from between 4 and 7 feet. It's also been described as looking like a giant lizard with leathery bat wings and a protruding beak filled with teeth. Kongamato seems like a very large bat, and like a bat, it only comes out at night. It sounds like a fantasy story, but then, as you dig deeper into the local lore of surrounding African nations, the existence of such a monster starts to seem a little more plausible. There are reports of a nearly identical flying creature being witnessed in Tanzania, Kenya, and Namibia. It's been seen by natives in Africa and by European explorers. There are even anecdotal reports of British scientists showing Africans living in the deep forest a drawing of a pterosaur. When the locals saw the picture, they panicked. They were terrified of the creature because to them, it was a drawing of Kongamato. Whatever has been hunting people in the deep African swamps for thousands of years looks exactly like a winged monster that went extinct 65 million years ago. It's not impossible, I guess, is it? There are lots of animals still alive that didn't die out with the dinosaurs, like sharks and crocodiles. Maybe a few species did survive in the deepest parts of the wild. Modern scientists aren't convinced. Skeptics have claimed that Kongamato is nothing but a hoax. The most logical explanation is that people saw a really big bat or a large stork and told stories of something far bigger and more ferocious. Until someone gets a picture, a living specimen, or at the very least, a fresh skeleton, this mystery will remain unsolved. King Juba's Lost Treasure. 2,000 years after the drama between King Juba II and his family, a buried treasure was discovered in the American Midwest. This may have been the same treasure that Caligula had been hoping to find when he took over the African kingdom. On April 2, 1982, a caver went exploring in a hole found by the river Embarrass. It's known today as the Burroughs Cave. What happened next is a mystery, a discovery that has now been riddled with suspicion and confusion. The caver in 82 was equipped with nothing more than a flashlight, a hammer, and a backpack. He descended around 500 feet down into the cave, and that was when he found the treasure. He came across massive statues carved from black stone. They looked like ancient Egyptian figures. Some of the statues were over 8 feet tall and estimated to weigh upwards of 6 tons. As he continued to explore more tunnels and vast chambers, he discovered one amazing thing after another. There were doors cut into the walls of the cave sealed with perfectly cut stone blocks. When the caver broke through one of these sealed doorways, he found himself inside a crypt. Within the crypt was a single skeleton draped in copper, gold, and jewelry. Next to the skeleton were a sword, an axe, and a shield. There was also a jar nearby, which had broken at some point when it fell on the floor. Lying amidst the broken shards were about 20 scrolls. This lost crypt was said to belong to a subject of Queen Cleopatra Selene and King Juba. Somehow, someone from the destroyed kingdom had managed to escape to the Americas. The scrolls told a fascinating story. When Cleopatra and Juba's son, King Ptolemy, was killed by Emperor Caligula, his people revolted. They rebelled against the Roman forces and fled to Ghana with the bulk of the treasure Caligula had been hoping to steal. They packed that treasure onto a small fleet of ships and set off on a voyage to unknown lands. They were hoping to rebuild their kingdom in a faraway place where the Romans would never be able to find them. The remnants of Juba's empire landed in America. The African sailors stashed their cultural treasures deep inside of a cave, and then no one knows what happened to them. There are no records of Africans in North America 2,000 years ago. Perhaps they had a confrontation with Native Americans. Maybe they built a small village for themselves and slowly died out. There is such little proof that most historians think the whole idea is just a tall tale. In fact, Burroughs Cave has been dismissed as a hoax by almost all professional scientists and historians who have been willing to comment on the subject. The caver who told the story said he was Russell Burroughs. He was a caving enthusiast with no experience in archaeology or anthropology. Russell was a prison guard who served in the Korean War. He claimed that he saw the artifacts in the cave, but he never really allowed anyone to inspect what he brought back to the surface. When others tried to find the cave, they came up empty. Russell said that there were coins, portraits, scrolls, weapons, and idols inside the cave. But the only artifacts he presented were stone tablets. The tablets were etched with writing from the Romans, Phoenicians, Greeks, Egyptians, and other ancient people. Anthropologist George Carter made the following comment about one of the tablets that he saw. He called it a crude fakery by an ignoramus. So that's that. But where do you stand? Do you think Africans could have arrived in North America 1,500 years before Columbus? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Africa splitting in two? Africa is splitting in half. In the heart of the East African wilderness, a seismic event has been unfolding lately that has repercussions for the entire world. Scientists are now focusing their attention on the Great Rift Valley. This phenomenon is literally tearing the world apart. The Great Rift Valley is like a wound on the surface of the planet, ripping and tearing instead of healing. The anomaly could lead to the birth of an entirely new ocean. Don't get too excited though. Scientists don't think we will see any dramatic changes in our lifetime. It could take millions of years for the continent to fully break in half, but we are going to feel the process every once in a while. The Earth is moving and shaking. The Great Rift Valley stretches all the way from the Afar region of Ethiopia to Mozambique. At the core of the valley is something called the East African Rift System. It's the place where the African continent is being pushed apart. The valley has attracted a lot of attention recently. A huge crack appeared in southwest Kenya. It's like the first big crack before the whole surface shatters. To understand where this epic crack came from, it's all about plate tectonics. As the plates beneath the world's surface move, the topography of our planet changes. The East African Rift System is where two tectonic plates are pulling away from each other. The Nubian plate and the Somalian plate are going in opposite directions. As the plates continuously drift, countries like Uganda and Zambia are getting farther apart. Pretty soon, relatively speaking, they're both going to have their own coastlines. Recent satellite images have shown that this split is definitely happening. As for the new ocean, that's going to take some time. Right now, the rift in Africa is above sea level, but as time goes on and the rift widens, it won't be above sea level anymore. Once the rift is big enough and low enough, water will start flooding into the rift zone, kind of like the Red Sea. Then, as time goes on, there will be more and more water. The sea will get bigger, and it might transform into an ocean. But don't panic, you don't have a calendar big enough to mark when this is going to happen. Scientists have said that the plates are moving away from each other at a rate of around 0.2 inches a year. The story of Leti, the ancient human. One of the greatest mysteries of Africa isn't controversial. It's not a fringe theory, and it doesn't involve aliens or giants. It's rooted in reality, but that doesn't mean it isn't exciting. The discovery of a skull small enough to fit in the palm of your hand is helping researchers unravel the truth of human existence. In a cave outside the city of Johannesburg, South Africa, international scientists discovered the partial skull of a child. They named that child Leti, and soon learned that it belonged to a species known as Homo naledi. Leti died between the ages of 4 and 6. Scientists don't know if Leti was a boy or a girl, but the important part is that Leti was alive 250,000 years ago. Leti's entire species would be extinct less than 20,000 years after their death. Understanding more about them is key to understanding how humans evolved. Leti and other Homo naledi are a sort of bridge between Homo sapiens and far more archaic members of the human family tree. Unfortunately for everyone, learning more about the species has been difficult. Leti's skull was found in the Rising Star cave system, but no other child's remains have ever been found belonging to the species. Where in the world are all the bones? Leti's skull was almost never found at all. It was discovered smashed to pieces in a narrow passage outside the chaos chamber of the Rising Star cave system. It seems the child was placed deliberately in a dark nook way at the back of the cave. It was a place that could have easily been missed by scientists. But why bury the child in such a remote place? Scientists think it may have had something to do with an ancient ritual. If that's true, now is the time to be shocked. If our ancient ancestors were performing burial rituals 250,000 years ago, that's a revelation. It means we didn't come up with the idea of burial rituals. We weren't the first ones to wonder where we go when we die, which means we didn't come up with the idea of gods either. Homo naledi must have had their own belief systems, and maybe even their own gods. But wait, because there is one more thing you need to know. Homo naledi, the only child skull ever found from the whole species, may have been smarter than us. Dr. Daryl DeRuiter is a paleoanthropologist who was involved in the study of Leti's skull. The doctor confirmed that all the fragments came from a single child. The doctor also confirmed Leti's brain size to be about 37 cubic inches. Even at just 6 years old, the child had about 90% of its adult brain capacity. Maybe this species wasn't exactly as smart as we are today, but they definitely had brains. They were also able to climb and hang from trees like monkeys, and walk on 2 legs with a modern human gait.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Shipwreck Treasure. The last thing you might expect to find in the desert is a shipwreck, but apparently there are many shipwrecks often found along Africa's skeleton coast. Portuguese sailors once called this place the Gates of Hell because the waters were so dangerous. De Beers Mining Company had located a mining site in Namibia right on the surf zone, but the waves made mining impossible. So they made a huge sea wall, creating a lagoon, and then pumped the water out. As they did, they noticed strange pieces of wood and metal scattered around. Geologists notified the chief archaeologist of the Southern Africa Institute of Maritime Archaeological Research, who dated the ship to the early 16th century. Then, on day 6, they found a treasure chest full of gold. The ship was officially identified as the Bom Jesus, or the Good Jesus, a Portuguese ship that went missing 500 years ago while en route to India. The ship was loaded down with 2,000 gold coins, tin, ivory tusks, and 44,000 pounds of copper ingots when it apparently went to its watery grave. The gold alone is worth about $9 million. So who gets to keep the gold? In this case, the ship belonged to the King of Portugal, but Portugal generously waived their rights to the find, allowing the country of Namibia to keep it. Fossilized whale. One look at the barren Egyptian desert, and it's hard to imagine that 50 million years ago it was once covered by a vast prehistoric ocean. Egypt gets only a few inches of rain a year, but bodies of whales are emerging from the shifting sands of the Sahara Desert. Known as Wadi al-Hitan, or Valley of the Whales, the area contains a fascinating collection of the ancient bones of sea creatures that are now long extinct, the Archaeoceti. The bones have been preserved under centuries of dirt and sand, offering researchers and paleontologists an exciting new glimpse into the past. The species of whales we have today and the ones that existed long ago are very different. Over time, legs became more and more unnecessary for the seafaring creatures, but some of the Archaeoceti skeletons found still have their legs and toes intact. This means the ancient whale ancestor once walked on land and only went into the water when it felt like it, like a hippopotamus. These ancient bones demonstrate how whales evolved from land-based animals to ocean dwellers. Whales found at the site include the Basilosaurus, which was a large predatory whale measuring 49 to 66 feet long, and the smaller Dorodon that measured around 16 feet long and fed on small fish. The well-preserved remains from millions of years ago help us to imagine what the lost Tethys Sea was once like. It is now a World Heritage Site and open-air museum where you can go yourself and appreciate the diversity of marine life 40 million years ago in the middle of the desert. Ghost Town. You wouldn't be able to tell if you were to look at Kolmanskop today, but over 100 years ago, it was one of the richest communities in the world. In 1908, diamonds were discovered in the area. It's rumored that there were so many diamonds that people were on their hands and knees just picking them out of the sand. Kolmanskop became a booming mining town in the middle of the Namibian desert. Houses went up along with schools, ballrooms, casinos, hospitals, factories, and also the first X-ray station in the region. Adventurers and diamond seekers flocked to the city with high hopes of building their fortunes. In 1912, town was responsible for producing nearly 12% of diamonds in the world. Literally, a diamond in the rough, Kolmanskop became the epicenter of luxury in the middle of nowhere. Unfortunately, the gems didn't last. New technology and machinery practically scraped the desert clean by the 1930s, and the town's riches depleted tremendously. New diamond deposits were found 168 miles near Namibia's border, and families and miners moved on. The town was essentially abandoned, and the harsh desert sands have since swept through and reclaimed the city. The eerie scene left behind is quite the sight to see, and Kolmanskop is now a popular tourist destination. Are you a fan of ghost towns? Let me know in the comments below. Arabian stone gates. Leave it to Google Earth to help make an amazing discovery in one of the world's biggest deserts. In 2017, archaeologists uncovered 400 stone structures that they believe were built thousands of years ago. Thought to have been built by the ancestors of modern-day Bedouins, the structures known as gates are at least 2,000 years old, but some believe they could have been built as far back as 9,000 years. Modern-day Bedouin people call them the works of the old men. The stones are stacked about 3 feet high, but they don't look like much at ground level. It wasn't until they were recently seen from the sky that we could tell exactly what they looked like and how many there were. David Kennedy, an archaeologist from the University of Western Australia, said that he refers to them as gates because when you view them from above, they look like a simple field gate lying flat, 2 upright posts on the sides connected by 1 or more long bars. For years, Kennedy cataloged the nearly 400 gates, with the longest measuring more than 1,600 feet long. But how did they get there in the vast desert plains of Saudi Arabia? These structures are difficult to spot from the ground as they are hidden away in the barren landscape of the desert, but once you see them from a satellite view, they stand out perfectly. Other structures are shaped like kites, and archaeologists now believe that these shapes were used to funnel stampedes of gazelles and other migrating animals into the structure to prepare them for slaughter. A new study published on these stone structures claims that humans may have driven a species of gazelle to the brink of extinction. These mass hunting techniques would have been spiritually significant social events, and done on such a large scale even thousands of years ago would have had a catastrophic impact on the animal population. Gibian Meteorites. Space rocks found in the deserts of Namibia have been used by ancient people for thousands of years. These mysterious rocks came to the attention of Englishman Captain J.E. Alexander, and rumors began that they perhaps held alien magic. 600 million years ago, a meteor hurled towards the Earth, shattering into over 100 pieces that were then strewn all across the desert. The captain was traveling in Africa and heard about large masses of iron rock, mostly around the village of Gibian, earning them the name of the Gibian Meteorites. He went to go see them for himself and sent a sample back to London, where an astronomer discovered that it had a high quantity of nickel and said it was from an iron meteorite. Locals used the rocks to make tools and weapons. Tribesmen in the Kalahari Desert used them as the arrowheads and tips of their spears and javelins, believing they would give them extra alignment and balance. Since the first discovery of these meteorites, more than 25 tons of Gibian meteorites have been recovered. Lines and patterns found on the outside of the rocks are the result of cooling in outer space over billions of years. Until recently, most that were recovered weighed between 200 and 1,000 pounds, but one of the largest ever found weighs in at a whopping 1,400 pounds. They each have a distinctive look due to the change in temperature when they entered the Earth's atmosphere. Friction raises the surface temperature above its melting point, and then, as the meteorite descends, the temperature drops, resulting in a thin layer of dark glass on the exterior. They also sometimes develop shallow pits that resemble thumbprints. Many of them are now on display, and any meteorite found in Namibia is automatically protected as a national monument and cannot be damaged or removed. Ancient megaliths. While you are most likely very familiar with Stonehenge in the UK, there is a place with standing stones in Egypt that was built thousands of years before Stonehenge. Nabta Playa is considered the world's first astronomical site. People here use the massive stone circles to create a type of calendar, which would align with the sun and stars to mark the seasons, the solstices, equinoxes, and served as a ceremonial site. This place dates back to 7,500 BC and was discovered 700 miles south of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. It is the oldest stone circle in the world, constructed by a cult of nomadic people who worshipped cattle. The megaliths may have played an important part in their lives, as they would have used the stars to travel across the desert to locate watering holes. Back then, people navigated using stars and the circular motion of the heavens. The structure was found in the 1970s while Egypt planned a major dam project along the Nile. At that time, an American archaeologist named Fred Wendorf, with the help of a local guide, found an area where a series of large stone megaliths sat lying on the ground in the middle of nowhere. At first, Wendorf believed they were natural formations, but on further inspection he realized the site was once a large lake bed and that the stone circles were something more remarkable. It would take several decades and years of excavations to uncover the mystery of the stones. J. McKim Malville, professor and archaeoastronomy expert, reports that this is human beings' first attempt to make a serious connection with the heavens. This was the dawn of observational astronomy, he adds. What in the world did they think about it? Did they imagine these stars were gods? And what kinds of connections did they have with the stars and the stones? Malville and others believe the complex and symbolic Nabta culture may have been the precursor civilization for the great advanced ancient Egyptian society that eventually built the famous pyramids 4,500 years ago. Underground Ethiopian churches. In the northern Ethiopian town of Lalibela, there are 11 monolithic churches that locals believe were built by angels. Carved into the mountains and plunging 130 to 165 feet into the earth, the buildings have cross-shaped openings that let the sunlight filter into their hollow interiors. Although the local people may believe that all 11 churches were completed by King Lalibela in one night with the help of an army of angels, there are other equally strange theories about how they got there. Some believe that the builders were the Knights Templar, the mysterious group of Christian crusaders who were at their most powerful during the 13th century. King Lalibela wanted to create a new Jerusalem after he visited the Holy Land himself before it was taken over by Muslim forces. Thousands attend daily services inside the churches as people stream in and out of the underground temples throughout the day. The churches were not built in a traditional way, but hollowed out from the rock, creating blocks under the surface of the earth. These blocks form doors, windows, columns, and floors. This massive work also has trenches and ceremonial passages, some with openings to hermit caves and catacombs. Narrow passageways lead down to the entrances, where inside sculptures and crosses decorate the walls. Unfortunately, time has not been kind to all of the structures, with some needing sheet metal to prevent erosion. The churches are now a UNESCO World Heritage Site and are visited by hundreds of thousands of pilgrims every year. The ruins of Casa Grande. If you ever wanted to capture a glimpse into America's prehistoric history, a trip to the Arizona desert might be in order. There you can see the Casa Grande ruins, a 4-story dirt pueblo that has survived for centuries. Built in 1350 by the ancient Sonoran people, the group is believed to have descended from early hunter-gatherers around 5,500 BC. Strangely enough, their structure was abandoned only a century later. With no writing left behind, no one knows much about the people who built Casa Grande, but there is some evidence of their agricultural practices. The most well-known building is the Great House, but there are other hints of the Sonoran people through the valley, stretching from Tucson to Phoenix. There are also a series of canals that stretch hundreds of miles and moved water from the river to their fields, as well as elements that allowed these ancient people to observe the summer solstice, the equinoxes, and to measure a phenomenon known as the lunar standstill that occurs every 18.6 years. But it was during the late 1300s to early 1400s that the ancestral people of the Sonoran Desert began to abandon the area. Some think it could have been from a multitude of reasons, including disease, natural disasters, drought, or floods. With the area abandoned, the only ties known to this ancient settlement are modern-day American native groups who have ancestral links to these people. They keep the spirit of their forefathers alive by continuing to honor cultural traditions, while researchers share the archaeological finds at Casa Grande as one of the tallest ancient American ruins that continue to inspire awe and curiosity. New Nasca Lion cat found. The Nasca Lions are one of the most puzzling creations of the ancient world. The lions, carved into the deserts of Peru, are made up of several hundred geometric and biomorphic figures. They were created by removing rocks and earth to reveal the contrasting material below. It is said that these served as indicator maps or as gifts to the gods, and to this day they continue to cause speculation and wonder. Now, a new etching has been found, adding extra fuel to the historical fire in southern Peru. Like most of the other Nasca Lions, the cat design dates back to between 200 BC and 100 BC. This new feline image was discovered when work was performed to give better access to one of the nearby hills that offers a vantage point over the other ancient designs. Made a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994, the Nasca Lions are located 250 miles south of Lima and stretch some 175 square miles along Peru's coastal plains. Experts say the design was almost missed because of its location on a very steep slope. As natural erosion threatens these geoglyphs, luckily conservationists were able to clean and preserve it, highlighting the 120-foot-long image of the cat. In recent years, 80 to 100 new designs have been uncovered, some of which predated the Nasca culture, showing that multiple groups took to the hills to create these larger-than-life etchings. As technology continues to evolve, some researchers have taken to using drones in order to get a better look at these ancient etchings. With more than 1,000 geoglyphs already known about, the discovery of this newest design adds more evidence to the idea that there could still be more hidden images out there just waiting to be found. Thanks for watching! What do you think of these incredible desert discoveries? Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!